Okay, so hello and welcome everyone, especially after the gala and after party yesterday. It's good to see you. We really appreciate it. The topic of our presentation is VO pipeline and voice design vision. VO going forward, meaning voiceovers. Our talk will have two parts. Justin will start and cover voice design vision, and after that, I will jump in to expand on that topic a bit more and to talk about our VO pipeline for Phantom Liberty. Firstly, I would like to introduce myself. My name is Patryk Woźniak. I joined company CDPR in 2019 as an audio intern. So it's been 5 years for now. I work on Cyberpunk 2077 Phantom Liberty, the base game, as well as The Witcher 3 Next Gen Edition. And yeah, I graduated at Warsaw Film School.
And I am Justin Dick, also a senior sound designer at CD Projekt Red. I joined the company in 2022, so fairly recently. Also working on Cyberpunk 2077, The Phantom Liberty, alongside Patryk with the VO design and implementation. And before then, I was working at Electronic Arts for a number of years, beginning in 2014. This is what we're showing today. First of all, we'll touch quickly on the scale of Phantom Liberty from a VO perspective. We'll move on from there to our voice design vision for the project, primarily focusing on one character. We'll then move from there, and Patryk will take over and talk about our VO pipeline in step-by-step, a number of processes through the whole pipeline to deliver it into the engine, into the game. And we'll talk about a number of pieces of tech that we use to do that, including our normalization, red engine editor, and broadcast emitters. And then finally, at the end, if we have some time, we'll have some Q&A.
Okay, so the scale of Cyberpunk. Fully voiced in 10 languages, more than 28,000 of lines per language because we introduced some fixes for the games as well. In comparison, the base game had around 82,000 for each language, more than 280,000 files, even more than that due to duplicates. 52 new actors, 80 of them recurring from the base game, meaning 132 in total, and we designed 40 new voiceover post-processes.
All right, just so you're aware, there's going to be major story spoilers throughout this presentation. We're talking about the progression of characters from the beginning of the game to the end of the game. So if you haven't played it yet, shame on you. You may leave now and come back when you've finished. All right, so the voice design vision, we're going to be focusing on one character, as I mentioned, Songbird. She has the most post-processes out of any character in the game, period, including the base game. We'll also be focusing on why we did things to her voice instead of how we did them. And when it comes to the design decisions for her voice, it was more about what we needed instead of how it sounded. So I'll be covering like who Songbird is, the character progression, what is the black wall, maintaining clarity, and then using her voice to support narrative. So I mentioned that Songbird has the most post-processes out of any character. In Phantom Liberty, she has approximately 15 different post-processes. A few are fairly similar to each other, but they have slight variations depending on the needs of the scene. We'll watch a video here just showcasing a number of her different voices.
V, can you hear me? I know about the bomb ticking in your head. If I could disarm it now, I would in a heartbeat. I can cure you. Once and for all.
The streets are too hot, so you'll need to go underground.
Black Sapphire V. Hampton's hosting a huge shindig there. Crash it on the sly. I'll find you. Make sure to tell Ray.
Saul, I've made so many mistakes.
Champagne glass over there. Prep some intel for you. Get it to read. You'll need it later.
Nothing went according to plan. What a fucking mess.
You know this soon enough. It doesn't matter now.
You are alone. All alone. This is it. The end is here.
All right, so who is Songbird and how does she speak to V? Well, primarily throughout the game, Songbird is speaking to V through the relic. The relic, if you're not aware of the base game, is a chip that V, the player character, has stuck in their head. On this chip is a personality engram of a particular character named Johnny Silverhand, played by some relatively unknown actor. I forget his name. Anyways, moving on. So we had, from the base game, we had a post-process for Johnny, and since Songbird is using the exact same tech to speak to V, we had a post-process already set up to begin with. So we had a base to go from. So we applied that to Songbird's voice. But we needed to make it distinct from Johnny. When Johnny appears as a hologram in V's mind, he sort of has this blue tinge to him. Whereas when Songbird appears in the same manner, she has a reddish tinge. So we wanted to distinguish them from each other in the vocal sense as well. So that meant like distorting things, etc. There's a bunch of different factors that go into her voice here. She's also a master netrunner, meaning that she's extremely proficient at hacking into systems she should otherwise not have access to. This is exemplified in that she hacks into the relic in V's head in order to communicate with V, meaning it must be like a forced entry, right? So we had to, we're thinking about distortion, glitches, these type of things in order to add to her voice as another layer there. Initially, one of the basic directions of how her voice might sound is like a radio or a distorted radio or like a black box from an airplane. So this was heavily distorted, compressed, this type of stuff. So that was in the initial direction, and that's what we started with. She also connects to this relic using the Blackwall protocol. The Blackwall protocol I'll go into in more detail later, but again, spoilers, this is not known to the player at the beginning of the expansion and is revealed later on that this Blackwall protocol is how she is connecting to V. So, character progression, we wanted to use her voice to exemplify her character progression as a person throughout the expansion. So starting with moving from fully human to fully cybernetic. Speaking with Songbird in the expansion is rare in person. But we still wanted to differentiate how Songbird sounded when she appears fully human in flashback sequences to when she appears fully cybernetic when she's speaking in person to V. So we added some metallic sounds to her voice in person, a little bit of distortion, a little bit of like flanger effects and things like this. It's kept quite subtle because we still wanted to maintain clarity of her voice when in person, especially when you're comparing to when she speaks to V through other means. But it is there. And when we had flashbacks, she had no post-process. Speaking through the relic is the most common way that Songbird speaks to V. And because of this Blackwall protocol, which is this progression of using the Blackwall that Songbird does, begins early in the expansion as very light, progresses partway through to a more medium level, and then by the end it's very heavy. This type of character progression for Songbird ends up being intrinsically tied to the main narrative of Phantom Liberty. So, the Blackwall. What is it and how does it sound? So the Blackwall is kind of like a giant firewall in the net. In the lore of Cyberpunk, there was a data crash where a virus was unleashed in the internet, and rogue AIs started going wild, and so an organization called Netwatch set up a black wall to prevent rogue AIs from entering local networks, where if they were to have access would cause chaos, mayhem, the end of the world, minor things, you know. And due to this, the black wall is very volatile, very aggressive. So most who come in contact with the black wall end up dying. This is exemplified in the base game, where there's a scene where the black wall is touched and a number of people die. However, Songbird is extremely proficient as a hacker, and so she is able to access it, find ways to maintain her sanity and life, but it's a constant struggle and a constant process when she is accessing it. So we wanted to have this kind of distorted voice again, but keep it inconsistent, so it's moving around as if she's actively working around avoiding overloading or anything of that nature. We also wanted to showcase this sort of hive mind sentient AI. Later in the expansion, later missions, when Songbird is essentially being taken over by rogue AIs from beyond the black wall, they refer to themselves as we. I took this as an indication that there are multiple of them attempting to access her. And in that sense, I wanted to have multiple voices within her voice when I post-processed her voice, especially later on. So, and because it's like a sentient AI, we wanted it extremely compressed, multiple voices, so multiple voices in a small space, and then more distortion and more glitches to her voice to exemplify this AI. So we had these layers, right? We had the distortion from the black box direction, distortion and metallic sounds from AI and code and glitches, this kind of stuff. But at that point, it didn't really sound exactly how we wanted it to sound. We had this direction about the black wall and how the black wall sounds from a sound effects perspective of like exemplifying cyber monsters, things of this nature. And I wasn't sure how to accomplish that yet at that point. So this was fairly early on when I had joined CD Projekt Red, where I was tasked with making the post-processes for Songbird's voice. And coming from working on sports games for 8 years into working on a sci-fi RPG open world game is quite the creative whiplash, to say the least. So I was looking for inspiration, and I found it in a little bit of an unlikely place. Yeah, here on the screen you'll see this screenshot. This is a small screenshot of our voiceover database. This is where the lines of dialogue are written and exist in. And beside them, in this DB column, we have essentially director's comments about what is the inspiration for this line? What is this line referencing? This type of stuff. And if you are at all familiar with StarCraft, you know what those words mean, or you know where they're from. So these lines are from a character in StarCraft, the Protoss Archon. And the Archon is a combination of two characters. They fuse into one and become a single entity. And the voice design for these characters is multiple voices. And it sort of has like a furnace or fire burning type quality to it. It sounds deep, it sounds demonic. It's very cool. So I saw this in this database and was like, oh, this is interesting. I can use this. And so I crafted another layer of her voice to sort of emulate this type of quality, this type of furnace, demonic, deep, multiple voices again, and layered it into the rest. So we had a shit ton of post-processes, and it was very heavy and very hard to understand. So we ran into this problem, like, we still need to understand her. It needs to be messed up. Her voice needs to sound broken, essentially, by the end, but we still need to understand what she's saying. So in order to fix this problem, we always kept a completely clean layer of her voiceover within all of the other layers of post-processing. This wasn't quite enough on its own, so we offset the processed VO from the clean VO very slightly. Just a couple of milliseconds when we were rendering it, just have the post-processed portion nudged slightly off from the clean, and that was enough to maintain this clarity while still maintaining the heavy post-processing noise of her voice. And finally, we used her character voice to support the narrative. This was the most important part about the post-processing of her voice. So there are a number of different ways that we use Songbird's voice in order to support the overall narrative of Phantom Liberty, considering that Songbird is the most important character in the expansion, and how she progresses is the main narrative of the expansion. So I'll go through a number of these examples of how we used her voice to support the narrative, and I'll show you examples of each of them. So first of all, the relic communication with Johnny and without Johnny. So when Songbird first connects to V, Johnny is still on the relic chip, and when this happens, V gets seizures as both of them are on the relic, and we wanted to reflect this on Songbird's voice. So in this scene, her voice is heavily distorted, and when she inevitably turns Johnny off, gets him off the chip, so to speak, the distortion reduces quite a bit. In combination with a change in music and the sound effects, it sort of has a calming effect in the scene, and I feel it works out pretty well. So I'll show you that really now.
You'll feel better any second now.
V, something stinks here. Think she's fucking with the relic. How in the...
All true, Johnny. But don't you fret. We're both safe.
Nah, fuck
Both
off.
of us on the biochip protocol at once can trigger shocks for V, like you just saw now. Gotta cut you off.
What
For
the...
your safety and V's safety. Had to mute him for now. He hears you fine, just can't talk back.
Right, so the second way that we supported the narrative is, as I mentioned, the Black Wall, the AIs, specifically from beyond the Black Wall, are slowly attempting to take over Songbird's mind. There are two really key moments within the narrative where this is especially prevalent. The first is somewhat early in the expansion. You are engaged in a fight with a bunch of Kurt Hansen, the main antagonist's goons, in a warehouse, and Songbird takes over a tank to help you fight against them. You win the fight, but at the end of the fight, Songbird starts overloading. She has strained herself too much hacking into this thing, and she ends up needing to reach beyond the Black Wall to stabilize herself and save herself. So after this scene, we take what was in her voice of the Black Wall and we ramp it up a little bit. And then the second time this type of thing happens is much later in the expansion. You're in a laboratory scene of Kurt Hansen's lair, and you end up she ends up trying to take over all of the security systems of a stadium, all of its defenses, all this kind of stuff in order to make an escape. And it's too much for her, so she has to, again, reach beyond the Black Wall in a substantial way in order to make this happen and take over the stadium security. And so again, after this scene, we ramp up the amount of Black Wall in her voice even more. So I'll show you a quick video of this progression. There's sort of 3 stages. One is early on, and then we'll cut and we'll go to the mid part, and then we'll cut again and go to the sort of final stage of her Black Wall progression.
You'll be in Dogtown in a minute. Try to steer clear of Hansen's goons.
Speaking of Kurt Hansen, what else do you know about him?
Hansen was an officer, Militech. Tail end of the Unification War, his unit was tasked with taking Night City. They managed to secure a foothold in the southmost pocket and stuck around. Refused to demobilize, lay down their weapons, abandoned Dogtown instead. Right, it's super important. Stays between us. It's gotta. Proof of my trust. I'm sending you coordinates. Come after dark. We should be able to talk freely. Okay, need to Delta. Let's see you soon.
Okay. What? Where now?
Now we get creative.
Need deeds.
I managed to reach the roof. Lower bit though. Need your help to climb higher and join you.
No plan's my favorite way to go. Need a few minutes.
Giving you just one, no more.
All right. Another way we supported narrative was by only having completely clean VO for Songbird in flashbacks. Otherwise, there's always a post-process applied. So Songbird's backstory is pretty rough. She's not been fully herself for a long time, and we wanted to help make that distinction through her voice. So a difference in her voice makes sense, especially due to becoming extremely heavily cybernetically modified. In the present, in the expansion, she's almost completely altered. There's very little human left in her. And so we wanted to just introduce metallic sound, some distortion to her voice. Again, pretty subtle because we wanted to keep it clean, but the difference is there. We also ended up using this same technique in the cinematic trailer that we released just before the game came out. In that it's showing the plane crash at the very beginning of the expansion, and in that we have the train sequence early on, essentially a flashback, and she's fully human there. So we used clean, and then when she was in the plane in the present, we again used this distorted voice. So I'll show you that now. You're going to see, first of all, a scene in the present where she's speaking cybernetically modified, a scene of a flashback, and then again back to the present, and hopefully you'll be able to hear the subtle differences in her voice.
I'm dying, Saul. Like V. Hansen has the cure we need. We run now, we both die. Relic's killing V. Blackwall's my poison. I can't bow out now.
You gotta be shitting me. Not going anywhere with you. Making me leave my home, my friends, everything worth a damn to me?
What's ahead is important. Worth so much more.
Yeah, no. Hard pass.
Dick, Netwatch rolls up here. What happens to your people? Who trust you? Who care about you? Netwatch will know who lent you the eddies for your deck, who let you tap into the subnet of the cafe downstairs. Understand this. I'm the one chance of keeping you safe. Your friends. Also, let them get hurt.
Blackmail. That your play? Don't know me enough.
I thought if I could control the future, I'd feel safe always. But I should have looked to the past. To lessons about loss. Repeated. I've made many mistakes, V. Too many to count.
All right. We also wanted to use this same Blackwall processing in other post-processes. So it isn't just present in the voice of Songbird when she speaks to V through the relic. It is also present when she speaks to V through other means. Particularly late in the game, you're in a bunker, and Songbird speaks to V through a number of TVs. She also speaks to V through a public announcement system within this bunker. And each of these had their own particular post-process applied, but we also applied this Blackwall processing underneath it as well to maintain this sort of narrative thread of her character progression, that this presence is always there in her voice. We also used this processing in the Brooklyn scene, which you just saw. This was a flashback sequence, kind of like a flashback, but you're within Songbird's mind in a way. And we use this processing on a song in that scene. So there's a number of songs that play during the scene, and slowly this whole vision is being taken over by the black wall, and at a certain point it takes over the record player that's playing the music. And the music at the time, we then applied this black wall post-process to it. And it makes the song sound pretty terrible. It's great. We also use this black wall processing in a number of weapons. So very late in the game, V can acquire some weapons that have AIs from beyond the black wall trapped within them. So we use the exact same post-processing on these weapons' voices because they speak to V. We just emphasized one side, the technological side, above the cyber monster side to give them a distinction, but it is in fact the exact same post-process, and I'll show you an example of that.
You seek the key to a door that does not exist. Typical of your kind.
All right, and finally, the narrative is king. At CD Projekt Red, narrative is always our focus. So we have rules in the world, and we have lore, and we need to follow this lore, unless we don't. If it is narratively beneficial to do so, we break the rules. So there is a moment where this happens. It's a particularly impactful moment, and I'll show you it now, and then I'll just do a short explanation of what's happening and what happened in the development process of this scene.
What?
It's working, V. Icebreaker's getting through.
Why? Why are you doing this?
Trying to save So-Mi. Who she is. Blackwall's eating your mind.
Nothing. You understand nothing. Too basic.
I'll just quickly explain this before we jump to the VO pipeline. So in this scene, you see V betray Songbird, and she loses control. She reaches beyond the black wall and attempts to make her escape. Now, there's one line of dialogue in there that is heavily post-processed. This is wrong. In the lore of the world, she's speaking to V in person. And the only other time there's sort of black wall processing on her voice is when she's speaking to V through other means, through the TV, through the relic, etc. She never has post-processing of black wall nature when she's speaking in person. So this moment was actually at one point reported to me as a bug. And they're right, it's wrong. It shouldn't happen. But I spoke to my narrative director about this scene and was like, yeah, this is wrong in the lore. This doesn't make sense. But it's cool. And it supports the narrative of the scene and it gives it more impact. So what do you think? And he agreed and we kept it in. And it ended up being a pretty cool moment. All right, now to Patryk, who's going to explain how we implemented all of this.
All right, thanks. I'll just jump right into it because we are tight. So I'll do a brief explanation of the first few steps before the VO file reaches us as voice designers. Our writers write lines in scene files in the engine and tag post-processes for each line. The post-process needs are usually established once we have our story finished. Then we meet up together with quest designers and discuss which scene or character will need some sort of post-processed voice. Once we have the final list, we add the types to the global list of post-processes from which writers can tag in the screenplay. Kittens, our VO database tool, extracts text from these scene files and imports the lines of text to our database in debug and in Polish. The localization team, starting with our internal English adaptation, then exports the lines from Kittens and do translations in Excel files in English and other languages and re-import them back to Kittens. The next step would be the VO lines being recorded in outsourced studios located in the country of the language that is being recorded. They are then delivered to us, followed by localization QA, doing a confirmation pass on the content of the lines. The last step here is when the VO files come to us as voice designers. So what about voice designer workflow then? Our work starts when recorded lines are delivered to the localization team. The localization manager uploads it into the deliveries folder in Perforce through the kittens. On this level, the files are automatically normalized based on a loudness manifest. I will explain the normalization part later on in more detail. After the files are normalized, they land in master folder. At this point, we already have pre-mixed VO playing in the game, which doesn't sound very placeholderish. But in order to make it sound round, nice, more final, we voice designers need to do a mastering pass on our end, which is just adding some effects like compression, EQ, etc. When it comes to mastering, we are preparing separate Reaper sessions for each language with different audio plugin chains based on genders. Main characters have separate Reaper sessions with custom mastering. And if a voice needs a specific sound to it, like a holocall or a mask, for example, then we would do post-processing on it instead and submit it to the post-processed folder. After rendering, in order to have those master files playing in the game, we need to submit it to Perforce, to the compressed folder. To do so, we need to upload our files into the folder in our local workspace, which is a reflection of the depot structure. And I'm talking a lot about some weirdly named folders. Let's take a look how it actually looks. Our Perforce, as you can see on the right of our local workspace, is a mirrored version of the depot, which is on the left. We need to have it this way in order to submit our changes into Perforce. And after putting the files locally into the folder, we can simply drag and drop new or changed files onto the changes and then submit. After that, our build system will trigger normalization process and integrate the files into the game build. Now let's talk what all those names mean. Those of you who are familiar with the terminology might be a little confused. Let us explain what it really means and how it should be named.
Right, so we start getting the files in the deliveries folder, which makes sense. The files are delivered, they go to the delivered folder. And then they're normalized and end up in the mastered folder. That doesn't make sense. It should end up in the normalized folder, right? And then when we submit our mastered files, we submit them to the compressed folder, which also doesn't make sense. And then those mastered files are then normalized and end up in the compressed mastered folder, which should be called the mastered normalized folder. The same thing applies to the post-process folder and the holocall folder and the helmet folder, et cetera, et cetera. And this is just essentially a misunderstanding and miscommunication between people who have different understandings of what words mean. So compressed to an audio designer, it means something entirely different to a programmer. And this ended up with this type of miscommunication with these weirdly named folders that don't really make sense. But, you know, communicate what you mean by certain words, lesson learned.
Exactly. So when all of the files land in correct folders, which is not that easy as you just heard, the next step is the mix of the dialogue with sound effects and music. After that, we obviously iterate and iterate on those while working on bugs, last call post-process requests, or removing unwanted post-processes. Now let's talk more in detail about the normalization process. Managing the loudness of voiceover files is always tricky. We knew we had to come up with a solution for that. The normalization process is where our VO files are getting proper loudness values applied in order to have some kind of dynamics and consistency in dialogues. For base game, together with our friends from Signum Audio, we developed a loudness normalization tool, which we later on used for automating the whole process. The tool is called Butte Normalizer. It gets as an input the delivered files already divided to folders based on their loudness level. This is done automatically by an executable which runs the normalizer. In our delivery requirements for external recording vendors, we ask for an Excel sheet with loudness types sorted by categories. The loudness is based on LUFS, which is a loudness measuring standard commonly used in media. Important to note, for us, loudness types are not based on the English version alone as a reference. Each language takes its own characteristics and dynamic range into consideration during the recording sessions. This is because different languages have different tempo, accent, and tonality. For mixing, we use Wise, which is an audio middleware tool, to trigger VO using a custom-built integration created by Colin Walder, our engineering director who spoke yesterday. Okay, so within Wise, we have a switch container for audio events called the VO matrix. This is on the left. And a feature, VO files, this container sets attenuations and every other effect and feature a VO file should have when it plays. It also uses a Wise feature called external events. At runtime, it's connected to an audio file in code. Within Red Engine, VO is most often implemented in scenes, which compose the quests and missions in the game. Scenes provide two switches, which drive the VO matrix mentioned in the previous slide. These switches are context and VO expression. In the next slides, we'll be taking a look at one scene in particular, which utilizes all of these different switches. Let's start with VO context. The different VO contexts are quest, community, and combat. Each has defaults for the whole scene, which can override for one section. The scene knows what its default is based on the location in the depot. The context defines which VO matrix container that we previously described the VO will be taken from. Based on that, we can define which lines should be more important within the scene. Considering the quest context is most important dialogue, it should always be heard over open world lines like community or combat VO. VO expression is set per VO line within each section, and it's taking the audio events from the switch container of VO context from Wise. So depending on the voiceover context, the VO expression preset will be different. VO expressions are basically VO default presets with a specific attenuation, reverb, and spread. To avoid having to create custom dialogue setup per scene by using custom VO events, we introduced these VO expression defaults. And speaking of custom VO events, if needed, we could create a simple audio event with specific attenuation curve, big reverb, low pass, high pass, delay, etc. Custom VO events always take priority over expression if a custom VO event is added. These custom VO events were often used in particular situations where a default expressions didn't do the job we needed it to. Here's a quick video which showcases several different VO expressions in one scene.
Get inside quick. Fuel tank's insulated. It won't explode. See anything?
Whole lot of wrecked aircraft.
Anyone alive?
Nobody jumping out to greet me.
Shit! Are we too late?
Pretty quiet in here. Like, tomb quiet.
That's true, then. I need to be sure. Need confirmation she's dead. Keep moving back. You'll see a safe room. I'll pop the release on the door.
Oh, fuck's sake.
Let go!
If I do, you'll calm down?
It depends who you are.
Relax. Songbird sent me.
And you are?
Name's V.
Apologies. I had to be sure it was really you.
Right. Let's delta before.
Okay, so in the scene we have three actors using the quest context, but using different VO expressions or VO events. Initially, Songbird speaks using the phone expression, which plays the lines in 2D with a post-process. V responds to her using the internal expression with a slight post-process, which is also in 2D. Then Meyers speaks using the spoken expression, which plays the lines in 3D. V responds also using the spoken expression with no post-process, but since V is the player character, it remains in 2D. However, in the scene, no custom event, VO event were used. The last portion of our talk goes over one of those custom VO events and how it was utilized to create a specific feeling from dialogue from a particular character. This particular character is Kurt Hansen and his public announcement speakers within Dogtown. Due to the vision of how Dogtown was supposed to sound, a tyrant leader having control and power over its people, we utilized a custom BO event and a custom implementation system called CDPR broadcast plugin, such a clever name, to make him sound a certain oppressive way. In Dogtown, Kurt Hansen is the king. To control the citizens of the district and spread propaganda, he uses speakers that are placed around the district. The broadcast plugin is a CDPR plugin for voice that allows us to transmit audio signals to a broadcast send. This send is listened to by our metadata editor and then played from multiple sound emitters called broadcast receivers in the game. No matter how many receivers are active simultaneously, the audio asset streams in only once. In a nutshell, the system allows you to have a sound play at multiple positions and have different attenuation, real-time parameter control, effects, etc. for each. This unlocks a lot of possibilities. For example, it's been used in Cyberpunk 2077 for reverb reflections, radio, and adverts in the city. And for Phantom Liberty, we use it for Kurt's public announcement speakers. The first step of the setup for the broadcast emitters is in WISE. We create events for both send and receiver objects. The sender object is a sound SFX, which uses an actual sound file as source. Usually, this is not meant to be a hearable sound in the world. It is only used to broadcast data. Typically, the send event should be triggered from a quest, scene, ambient, emitter or area, or from metadata. The channel in the slide is a number identifying a channel of communication. If a sender broadcasts its source to channel X, and any receiver listening to channel X will play the source back. The receiver is also a sound effects, which uses the sender as its own source. This is going to be a hearable sound, hence it is usually prepared like any other normal sound, can have a custom attenuation, fade, etc. This one in particular has some settings applied, a bigger reverb, high pass filter, and a custom attenuation. Each sound can be played at a specific position in the world. This is relevant for the receivers, but irrelevant for the senders. Moving to metadata editor. We briefly mentioned our metadata editor earlier. Shortly about that and why we had to use it. To make it easier for the audio team members to edit the behavior of audio triggers implemented in scripts, code, particle editors, etc., an intermediate layer was implemented that deals strictly with the trigger behavior assignments. This is the audio metadata editor, which initially receives the broadcast sends. We needed to use the metadata editor in this way in order to have specific entities in the world emit VO lines. These entities that you can see were placed on the streets of Dogtown by other disciplines. Technically, we didn't have actors to play those VO lines, so we used speaker entities as actors. We had 6 different types of speaker appearances, and implementation of the audio metadata in the entities saved us a lot of time, because otherwise we would have to do it manually with the use of ambient emitters, placing them around the world. Plus, this way we had the sound playing from an actual speaker. To sum it up, the scene graph triggers a custom VO event to play a specific line of dialogue. It is received in WISE, where it is then passed to a broadcast send, received by metadata, and finally played in the game through the public announcement speaker entities. But this setup didn't give us the full effect that we wanted speakers to portray. To enhance the final result, I placed regular ambient sound emitters around the Dogtown district with an audio event that was using the same broadcast channel, but with a delay effect plus some more reverb and low pass and high pass filters. And now, after all of that, please listen to the final result.
This is Kurt Hansen. You are now in Dogtown. Rule 1, no NCPD. Back to the bullet to the brain. Rule 2, no corpse. You're just not welcome. Rule 3, my people keep the peace in the district and ensure security. They are the law. Follow the rules or face the consequences.
All right, so key takeaways. Number 1, understand what is most important to the game you are making and use that as guidance for your designs. In our case, this is the narrative progression of the game. And if it is possible to utilize voice design to support what is most important to your game, do so. For us, we were very fortunate in that we're creating a game in a world where voice design, weird-sounding voice design in particular, is very common. So we could just go crazy and have as much fun as possible, but use it in a smart way. How something is designed is not as important as why it is designed that way. Again, this was all designed in a particular way to support the narrative of our game. Try to automate as much as you can. This will allow you to focus on design. This is somewhat self-explanatory, but like for us, this is the normalization process. This was just so easy for us. We would just submit files to Perforce. They would automatically get normalized to the standard that they were set to, and then they would play in-game at the level that they were supposed to play at right away. Very simple, very easy, not a lot of work for us to do. Cooperate closely with your tech teams, communicate your needs, brainstorm with them, and this will make your work easier again. This is like broadcast emitters, things like this, where we wanted a specific type of design and we needed a certain tool in order to make this happen. And then finally, create solid presets to limit the amount of custom work that you need to do. This, for us, was the VO matrix in the form of VO context and VO expressions, where you could just say, this person, this line of dialogue is from the quest, and it is through a phone, so it should have these qualities to it. Very easy, very quick. And that's all.
If anyone has any questions, please come up to the mic in the middle of the room.
Hi, Michał.
Hi. So, awesome job, guys.
Thanks.
I was just wondering, because obviously the relationship between Blackwall and Songbird is very important narratively, but also Songbird is in some capacity a mirror image of V as well. And I was wondering if, when you were making the VOs, did you see any kind of a relationship between their voices, how they're perceived? Was there any reference in there?
No, there wasn't. Primarily because you always hear V in your own head. So there's only like two ways that you hear V. One is when she or he is speaking out loud. Sorry, I always play Songbird or V as female. Anyways. Two ways. Speaking out loud, which you hear just without post-processing in 2D, and then internal, when she's speaking through a phone or to Johnny or to Songbird in this case, with a slight post-process, again, in 2D. So there wasn't really an opportunity for V as a particular character to have this sort of progression alongside Songbird.
Awesome, thank you.
No problem.
Hi, I have several questions, but let's start with one. Sure. When you record in different languages and you have obviously very heavy distortions there and other post-process, how you work with this? Because they have different sounds and it sometimes could be tricky.
Yeah, so this sort of goes back to the slide where I talked about maintaining clarity in the voice. We didn't do separate post-processes per language for the character like Songbird, who has this heavy post-process. This is primarily just because of time. There's not enough time to go through it all because, again, we did voiceover in 10 different languages. So going through each line by line is impossible. Also, I don't understand anything besides English. Regardless, it was this moment when we realized there was too much post-processing to understand her voice, where we ran into this conundrum as well, where we were like, oh yeah, we can't understand it well enough in English. I'm sure we can't understand it well enough in the other language either. So this is where we looked for this solution to maintain clarity, and this worked for other languages as well.
Yeah, but I also think that we have big localization team, and basically we have dedicated person for each language. So they are also playing the game, and they were actually sometime telling us, hey, this line is not understandable. Let's redo it maybe a little bit. Use less of a post-process on this line.
Okay, and the second question would be how you attend to with this post-process and environmental sounds, because sometimes they can be actually don't work together. So how we do it?
Yeah, so this was difficult for sure. There's often times where sounds would get implemented in a scene, and then the dialogue would be implemented afterwards, or the other way around, and then they would not mix well together. And this was a process that we had to do over time of iterations and all this kind of stuff, where we would mix a scene, realize that, oh, the sound effects are smothering the VO, or we're not hearing enough of the environmental sounds. So we had to tweak each of them at that point. We didn't really tweak the VO so much, but we tweaked the sound effects around the VO, because the VO sort of has this established loudness standard, as Patryk went over, where if the dialogue needed to be shouted or spoken in a normal voice, it had a particular loudness, and we had to craft the sound effects around the VO, because in CDPR the narrative is the most important part, so the dialogue is always the most important.
Yeah, plus we didn't go through the kittens in details, but this is like very easy for us to change the loudness category for the file. And if this still doesn't push the dialogue to push through the other sounds, then we can also add those custom VO events for also each line with a boosted loudness. But yeah, also like doing some duckings on other sound effects. Yes.
Hi, thank you for the great talk. I wanted to ask, do you use, when rendering files, do you use any software, like commercial or in-house, to tag a metadata or something, just to not get overwhelmed by the amount of files and, you know, which ones are compressed, which ones are mastered, which ones... So do you do it in the name or in the tag, or half or...
Was this mostly like in kittens, essentially?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it was mostly in kittens. This is where we kept track, basically, of what's happening. Yeah, like... Yeah, essentially... We didn't add any metadata to the files.
No, they all had a particular name and a GUID that would associate itself with a particular line of dialogue within the database. And so this database would be analyzing all the files that are in Perforce, and it would indicate to us by a color whether the file is missing, or if it is out of date, or if it needs a post-process, or if it needs a mastering, whatever that might be. So we could easily just search for, in the screenplay, the line of dialogue. It's like, okay, this line of dialogue from this scene has this GUID, search for that GUID, and then we would see that line of dialogue and be able to tell its status.
Yeah, or either by just the dialogue text.
Or the text as well, yeah.
Or through the scene. If you know the name of the scene, you know which section is it.
And I think that's all the time we have for questions. Thank you very much. Oh,
One more, quick one.
Hey guys, nice presentation. Sorry for my voice.
Thank you.
I was wondering, how are you doing the lip syncs with such a heavy post-processing for the voices? If you could show some light here.
We didn't actually make any changes to our lip syncing system for heavy post-processes like this. And I believe, again, this like maintaining the clarity ended up working to our benefit, and the lip sync just the system that we had in place previously just worked.
Yeah, but we also tried not to add too much tail to the file length.
That's
as
true.
well.
Yeah,
this did the job, I guess. Plus the jolly, it's working quite nicely.
Okay, thank you. That's the time we have for this lecture. Thank you, Patryk. Thank you, Justin, for this amazing lecture.